Welcome to Measuring Success Right, the official podcast of the Marriott Student Review, a podcast for students by students, where we connect the leaders of tomorrow with the issues of today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Measuring Success Right. I'm your host, Ryan Pinkney. Today, we are excited to be talking to Erica Bassett. Erica Bassett is from Georgia, and she is a senior in the editing and publishing major and has a minor in nonprofit management. She is also the editor-in-chief of the Ballard Brief, which we'll be talking a lot more about. And she also loves listening to comedy in her free time. Erica, thank you so much for being on the show. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
So let's dive in. Like I mentioned, we're going to be focusing on the Ballard Brief. And if our listeners remember, a few weeks ago, we had the privilege of having Stephen Fox on the show, and he talked to us about the Ballard Center. And so Erica's just going to explain and share some more about her personal experience with the Ballard Center and the work that they do there. But to get started, we just wanted to ask, can you remember the first time you heard about the Ballard Center?
Yes, faintly. So it was about 3 years ago is when I just started the editing and publishing major at BYU. And I was in a lecture series class, which is where they bring in representatives and employees from companies all over Utah, as well as within programs at BYU on campus itself. And one day they brought in an employee from the Ballard Center for Social Impact, and he spent a good half hour talking about what the Ballard Center is, what their mission is, some of their programs. They have a bunch of internships and classes and all of these wonderful opportunities that he explained. And I remember sitting there, second row, going, wow, this is actually pretty cool. This is something that I could really, really get into. And naturally, as an undergraduate student, I immediately forgot that it existed. Didn't really act much on that feeling afterwards until several semesters later, when I got an email from the linguistics department that had a list of job postings on it to help out their students. And the Ballard Center was actually looking for an editor. They had posted on the linguistics department website, and they had reached out to get the word out. And so I was really excited because I recognized the Ballard Center. I recognized their logo. I still remember getting that email. And that presentation from several semesters back flooded my mind again, and so I applied, got the job, starting as a copy editor actually, and it's been excellent. So that was my experience.
Oh, that's awesome. And so what caught your attention, I guess, from that presentation? Was there something that stood out that you really identified with, or why did it catch your attention?
I think the main moment or the favorite part of that presentation for me was just talking about the mission. So the Ballard Center has a bunch of programs, including Ballard Brief, which is what I'm part of. But the Ballard Center as a whole does this amazing opportunity to make impact in the world appropriately, really understanding the issues and really coming to implement long-term effective solutions. And that's what I wanted to do. What I always wanted to do was to serve people, but serve them in the right way, and to make a difference in the world that would last. So that really caught my eye.
That caught your attention, wow. And so have you been able to participate in any of the other programs that the Ballard Center offers, in addition to Ballard Brief, obviously?
Technically, everything that I've done within the Ballard Center is for Ballard Brief. But I guess I should caveat and say that as a Ballard Center employee, I've been so involved with other programs indirectly because we're all just kind of in harmony, all working together. So I spend a lot of time talking to other program leaders, chatting with other student employees, helping out with other general Ballard Center awareness events and marketing events. So technically I'm just in Ballard Brief, but there's this sense in the Ballard Center that you're really part of the whole, right? And you're an employee for the whole center. And so that's the way that we like to approach things, and that's the way that we like to interact. And so there's not this feeling of this is my job and I'm just going to focus on my job. Everybody's helping each other.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you told us a little bit about, I guess, helping with other programs, but we didn't touch on exactly what do you do specifically with Ballard Brief. So could you just talk about that? So you're the editor-in-chief. What does that mean?
Yeah, so very, very briefly, I know that Stephen Fox, my boss, covered this in a previous episode, what Ballard Brief is. But Ballard Brief is a 2-credit class offered by the Ballard Center, and the idea is students will come into our class with a social issue that they're passionate about. It could be mental health, the environment, racial inequality, discrimination, just a host. There's so many different issues out there. And they come in with this social issue they're passionate about and write basically a research paper that we call a Ballard Brief. They work with an editor throughout the semester to submit drafts and to get edits and feedback and work through that so that by the end of the semester their brief is publishable, which is excellent. So that's Ballard Brief. What I do as editor-in-chief for Ballard Brief is a mix of program management and actually helping out with the class. So as far as program management goes, there's a lot involved with that. So
Sure.
yeah, so I interview and hire new editors on the Ballard Brief team. I provide the regular training for our editors so that they can provide helpful feedback and build a relationship with their students, which is so important. I oversee team meetings once a week and meet with my boss, Stephen, and a few other people regularly to keep the program moving. I do budgets, which most people, budgets is not the most exciting part of their job, but I do enjoy making budgets, which
That's
is
awesome.
so silly, but it's fun. And then one of my favorite parts on the program management side of things is that I get to meet one-on-one with the editors throughout the semester. And that's just to check in, see how they're doing, ask or answer any questions that they may have, and see how they're doing with their goals. Because we always want to make the experience good for the students in the class, but also for the editors themselves, the student employees. So that's the program management side of things. I also am involved with the class. So the managing editor for Ballard Brief actually teaches the class, but I help as needed, basically. So I might help with a lecture every once in a while, but mainly what I do with the class is work with a couple students to help be their primary editor and help get their Ballard Brief to where it's publishable at the end of the semester. So I meet regularly with them just to check in, make some edits, give them some feedback, help them out. And then the fun part is in a few weeks, I'll be approving all of the, or at least reviewing all of the Ballard Brief drafts for approval for publication, which is exciting. So that's a long-winded way to describe what I do. It's a busy time, and it's just a part-time job, but it's a job that I love.
Yeah, I was going to say that is a lot of things to tackle. Just out of curiosity, how long have you been doing, or how long have you been the editor-in-chief? Yes,
that's a great question. So I started out as an employee at Ballard Brief about 1.5 years ago.
Okay.
Started out as a copy editor, and it's kind of a fun story of how I actually became editor-in-chief that I kind of want to talk about just a little bit.
Go ahead.
Because it's a fun story to me. I was copy editor, which is I look at the sentence level details, the punctuation, the citations, all of the nerdy stuff, right? The minute details. And I did enjoy that job, but I knew that the editor-in-chief at that time, I knew that she was graduating and would be taking off soon. And there was this question in the air of who would take her place. And I don't know what gave me the audacity, quite frankly, what gave me the guts to do it. But I knew that I wanted to try out the job. And so the end of last summer, I reached out to her and said, I want your job. Is that, can I say that,
Yeah.
And So we had a good long discussion, and she trained me from September to December for this position. And then I started as an official editor-in-chief this past January. So it hasn't been long, but
Sure.
it's been a fun experience.
Yeah. And your boldness paid off, it sounds like.
It did, yes. Let that be a lesson. Yes, be bold.
That's awesome. So, what do you love about the job? Why do you stick with it?
That's a great question. I have a couple thoughts, but the main idea for me, or the thing that I love most, is it combines my love for service and for impact in the world with my skills, because I'm an editor at heart, right? And I'd spent a good long while trying to find something meaningful to me. Meaningful meaning that I felt like I was making an impact and making a difference in the world. And I'd spent a very long time at BYU, the first 2.5 years, I guess, just trying to find that something. I took classes, I did on-campus internships, I was talking to so many people, trying to find that thing, right, that would provide meaning in my experience at BYU. And when I finally heard about the Ballard Center, I got so excited to be part of it, right? And so I just love that I get to manage a program. That's fun to me. That's exciting. It's very, very fun, as well as edit, which is something I'm pretty good at. I enjoy doing as well. And I get to use all of those talents in a way that I love.
Yeah. That's awesome. What is the general vibe of the class and your team? Is it, could you speak to just like, is it fun? Is it professional? What would you say about that?
I would say with every leadership team, with every new editor-in-chief, there's always a different leadership style, and mine is certainly a little bit more on the professional side, but that's my personality. As far as the Ballard Brief team as a whole, we have fun. We have a ton of fun. We love to work together. We love to bounce ideas off of each other, collaborate, and really build relationships with each other and with the students in our class. So we have a great time. It's
That's
really
awesome.
fun.
Awesome. Thanks. So what would you say to students who don't know anything about the Ballard Center and may be interested in signing up for a class? What is your pitch, I guess, for the Ballard Center?
That's a good question. And the hard part is not a lot of students on BYU campus know about the Ballard Center. And once they actually get into the Ballard Center, there's this overwhelming sense of, I wish I'd known about this sooner. Or, this is an awesome thing. I'm so glad I found it, right? I would say that for students who want to make a difference in the world and make a real difference, the Ballard Center is the place for them. And we have so many different opportunities. They just need to find their niche, right? So obviously I'm biased towards Ballard Brief, so this is my plug of, if you love to research and write and understand an issue in its entirety, then definitely try out Ballard Brief, right? In our class, you write this Ballard Brief that talks about the context of a social issue, what factors or situations contribute to that issue, what are the consequences of that issue, and a little bit of the practices that organizations or legislation is trying to do to alleviate that issue. So if you really want to make an impact and really understand what's going on in the world, the Ballard Center is definitely the place for you, right? And there's so many other opportunities that I could go on and on about, with internships and just basic classes and clubs, all the things that the Ballard Center is known for, that it is very exciting. Yeah.
So you're graduating soon, so this question will be kind of directed at that idea, but what do you think is the greatest lesson that you can take away or experience that you will, remember 20 years from now? What stands out from you from your time being a part of the Ballard Center?
That's a good question. I think that there are definitely bigger experiences that I have had at Ballard Center, especially with Ballard Brief, that I'll always remember. For instance, we host our summer summit, which is where we have some of our former Ballard Brief students come in and effectively give TED Talks about their social issue to the general public. It's a fun night. It's a huge deal with the Ballard Center. And a fun story, we actually had one of our students had to back out at the last second. And so we were short a presenter, which means that I got the chance to step in
my heavens.
and present on the Ballard Brief that I wrote on, which is an experience I wanted to talk about on its own. But that was amazing. And I don't consider myself an extrovert, a eloquent speaker. In fact, I'm terrified of speaking in front of a crowd, and yet it was an opportunity for me to talk about the research that I had done with my Ballard Brief, and that was fun. But besides the bigger experiences that I have, I think of just the day-to-day fun experiences, the connections that I have made with my coworkers and with the program leaders, my boss. I'm going to remember those small little details, right, of coming into the Ballard Center and working in that space and talking to people and just interacting and laughing and having a good time. It's just all those little experiences I think I'm going to take with me for a long time.
That's awesome. And I'm sure it must have been very scary, I guess, to present on the spot with no time.
It
right?
was.
Yeah.
I will give a little bit of credit. I had a few hours to prepare a
that's good.
presentation and to prepare that lovely PowerPoint that saved my life. So.
Nonetheless, very, very nerve-wracking a bit. So,
but fun.
But that's awesome.
But a good experience.
Very cool. Well, we're coming towards the end of our time. But we do have just a few more questions. So in your experience with Ballard Brief or even in the Ballard Center, have you been able to see either a student start a company that has a social impact theme, or what kind of real life experience have you been able to see happen because of the Ballard Center or Ballard Brief?
I would say, well, first of all, if you go into the Ballard Center and talk to any student employee and any of the leadership, you're going to get 100 stories about people who are making real differences in the world, right? So I can only speak of the ones that I've experienced,
sure.
and they might seem a little minute, but they're making a difference, right? And they're just one of many examples. I had two come to mind. The first was we actually had someone from the community reach out to Ballard Brief. They had read a brief that one of our students had recently published and were really impressed by it. And they reached out to us to thank us about the research that the student had done and the passion that the student clearly had for the topic, right? And said that they were going to share it with everyone that they knew, with everyone in the related field, right? Which was very exciting to see that the student was actually making a difference in people's lives, that people were actually reading and engaging with these Ballard Briefs is very exciting. And that's one of the smaller aspects of the Ballard Brief that I'll just remember for a long time. But that's the first one. The second one is the Ballard Center has so many amazing theories and models about how to make real world change in the world, right? And I actually had the opportunity to volunteer with a couple nonprofits recently. Last summer, I volunteered with Choice Humanitarian, which is an organization that helps or seeks to alleviate poverty in countries around the world. And one of the things that they've been trying to do is create this curriculum that will provide farming techniques for low-income farmers and families in these remote areas of the world. It's very exciting, and it's a hard task, right? Yeah. Because it begs the question of what's going to be most effective, what's actually going to make a difference. And so I was part of the team that was creating this curriculum, and I had the chance to bring in all of those principles and ideas from the Ballard Center about real-world change and apply it to that curriculum and to this project for this nonprofit. And I'm happy to say that the project is going out for testing and for implementation based on those theories, right? So it's very exciting to see how I'm applying it in other aspects of my life and seeing where that impact is.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. What I've collected from talking to you and talking to Stephen is that really students who do things in the Ballard Center really take it and apply it in the real world. And I think that's a really, really special and cool thing about the Ballard Center is how much, it's not just in the classroom, but it's in the real world, real world learning.
Absolutely.
So that's really cool. So my last question is our traditional question. You've touched on it a little bit, talking about how the Ballard Brief has given you a chance to really serve people, but how do you measure success in your life, and what does success mean to you?
I would say, as a senior in college, I'm still defining what success is in my life. Right? It's a constant that I don't have a definite answer, right?
Sure.
Which is the most interesting thing. But I think my time at the Ballard Center and with Ballard Brief has really helped define what success is in my life and what it means to me. So, to me, success is all about learning and growing and becoming the person that other people need you to be, right? Which is actually, it's powerful. It's exciting to be able to say, in my day-to-day, here's the difference that I'm making in other people's lives. And not just that, but here's how I'm growing and learning as a result. So I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm definitely growing into this role of editor-in-chief, constantly growing. Yeah. And every day I make mistakes, and I own those mistakes, and I learn from those mistakes, right? And it's in that struggle and in that discomfort and in that space of growth that I find myself living a very, very joyful life.
Yeah.
It's very great. I have a lot to be grateful for. I love this job. It gives me a lot of meaning because it's not easy, right? And so I would just say that success is that growth, right? In that becoming of who you want to be, and then celebrating how far you've come and how far you're going and where you've been.
That's awesome, and that's beautiful. Thank you, Erica, for sharing that. And thank you again for being with us here on the podcast. And yeah.
Thank you.
Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or SoundCloud so you never miss an episode. Be a friend and tell a friend about measuring success right.
This podcast is a project of the Marriott Student Review at Brigham Young University. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Marriott Student Review or online at marriottstudentreview.org.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect official policy or position of Brigham Young University or The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.